Imagine a world where the familiar stars and stripes never flew, where the 4th of July passed as just another summer day, and where the very concept of American as a distinct national identity remained an unwritten chapter in history. What if the United States had never declared independence? It's a question that at first glance feels almost sacrilegious, a fundamental challenge to the bedrock of modern identity. Yet, by venturing into this speculative realm, we gain a profound appreciation for the pivotal moment of 1776, understanding just how fragile and contingent our present reality truly is. Alternate history isn't about rewriting the past for fun. It's a powerful lens through which to examine the forces that shaped our world. To understand how such a radical divergence might occur, we must first revisit the powder keg that was colonial America. The mid-18th century was fraught with tension. The Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, the Boston Tea Party, all fueling a growing resentment towards British rule. The colonists felt increasingly burdened by taxes imposed without their consent, their pleas for representation falling on deaf ears across the Atlantic. But what if those ears had listened? Our point of divergence, the moment history takes a different turn, could be a more conciliatory British government. Imagine a different monarch than George III, or a more astute Prime Minister, one who recognized the simmering discontent and chose appeasement over authoritarianism. Perhaps, instead of merely repealing the Stamp Act, Parliament offered substantial, tangible representation to the colonies. What if colonial delegates were invited to Westminster, granted genuine legislative power, and their voices truly heard within the halls of British power? Such a move could have diffused revolutionary fervor, transforming defiant colonists back into loyal subjects, albeit with a stronger sense of self-governance. The calls for independence might never have reached a fever pitch, replaced instead by a burgeoning sense of shared destiny within a reformed British Empire. Under continued British rule, the 13 colonies would have evolved differently, their destinies inextricably linked to London. Mercantilist policies, designed to benefit the mother country, would likely persist, albeit perhaps with some modifications to accommodate increased colonial representation. This could mean colonial industries, rather than developing independently, would be geared towards supplying raw materials to Britain or serving specific imperial needs. Trade routes would remain firmly anchored to the British global network, stifling the emergence of an independent American economic powerhouse. Without the crucible of revolution, the nascent American identity, forged in shared struggle and a collective vision of liberty, might never have fully coalesced. Instead, regional identities, the proud Virginian, the industrious New Englander, the pragmatic Pennsylvanian, would likely remain paramount, perhaps even intensifying within a larger imperial framework. Cultural assimilation into British norms would be more profound. British fashion, legal systems, educational institutions, and even accents would hold greater sway, without the countercurrent of American exceptionalism to challenge them. Consider westward expansion. Historically, the American drive west was often characterized by rapid, sometimes chaotic, settlement and conflict. Under British rule, this expansion might have been far more controlled and systematic. The Crown, with its established imperial bureaucracy and experience managing vast territories, might have imposed stricter regulations on land claims, perhaps even prioritizing a more measured approach that, ironically, could have led to a different, potentially less violent relationship with indigenous populations. The push for new territories would still exist, but it would be governed by imperial policy, not by the individualistic spirit of the American frontier. Without the American Revolution, the very word American would hold a vastly different meaning. It wouldn't signify a distinct nationality, but perhaps a regional descriptor, akin to being a Canadian or Australian within the Commonwealth. The language, education, and legal systems would remain firmly British. The rich tapestry of American cultural innovation, from its unique literary traditions to its groundbreaking political philosophy, might never have emerged in the same form. We would be looking at a North America that, while vast and resource-rich, remained an integral, albeit influential part of an even larger, more enduring British Empire. The seeds of dissent would have been scattered, not sown, leaving a very different landscape in their wake. This continuation of British rule would have fundamentally reshaped the political landscape of North America, keeping these vast colonies as integral parts of the ever-expanding British Empire. Instead of independent states, we might envision several models of governance. One possibility is a more integrated model, where colonial representatives gain significant, albeit not absolute, parliamentary representation in Westminster. This would have meant a stronger voice for North American interests within the imperial government, potentially averting future grievances by providing a formal channel for redress. Another plausible scenario is the evolution towards a dominion model, akin to what Canada or Australia later became. Here, the North American colonies would enjoy substantial internal autonomy, managing their own domestic affairs, but would retain unwavering allegiance to the British Crown and participate in imperial foreign policy and defense. This balance of self-rule and imperial loyalty could have fostered a powerful, unified British North America, a jewel in the crown. Crucially, a strong, unified British military presence across North America would have been a given. This formidable force would not only suppress internal dissent, but also act as an impenetrable shield against the ambitions of other European powers. French expansion south from Canada, Spanish incursions from the south, or Russian claims in the Pacific Northwest would have been met with the full might of the British Empire, ensuring British dominance across the continent. This unchallenged military supremacy would have solidified British control, preventing the fragmentation of North America into competing European spheres of influence and ensuring a singular imperial vision for the vast territory. Economically, the implications of a British North America are staggering. The immense resources of the continent, timber, vast agricultural lands, and later, coal and oil would have flowed directly into the British imperial coffers, bolstering its industrial might and global reach. This continuous influx of raw materials and captive markets would have accelerated British industrialization, arguably even beyond its historical trajectory. The absence of an independent American economic competitor on the global stage would have profoundly reshaped the 19th and 20th century world economy. Without the US as a major industrial and financial power, Britain's economic hegemony might have endured far longer, delaying or altering the rise of other industrial giants. Global trade routes would have remained more heavily concentrated around the British sphere, and the pound sterling would likely have maintained its status as the unchallenged global reserve currency for an extended period. The social fabric and cultural evolution of this British North America would also be dramatically different. One of the most significant changes would concern slavery. With the British Empire's abolition of slavery in 1833, it's highly probable that this act would have extended across all North American colonies. This could have led to an earlier and more uniform abolition of slavery across the continent, avoiding the brutal American Civil War and its devastating human cost. However, it might also have led to a protracted struggle within certain colonial legislatures, particularly in the South, creating different forms of social unrest or economic transition. Immigration patterns would also shift. Instead of being drawn to the promise of American independence, European immigrants might have been directed primarily to British North America under imperial oversight, swelling the ranks of a loyal workforce and population. This could have led to a more centralized and perhaps less diverse immigration process, shaped by British imperial policy rather than individual colonial initiative. Furthermore, the fate of indigenous populations might have been altered. While British colonial history is far from benevolent, a continuous British presence, with its established protocols for treaty-making and land management, might have resulted in a less aggressive and more controlled westward expansion than the historical US. There might have been fewer outright wars of extermination, replaced by a more structured, albeit still often exploitative, system of reservations and treaties under imperial administration. Major global conflicts would also see British North America playing a profoundly different role. During the Napoleonic Wars, this vast territory would have been a critical staging ground and resource supplier for the British war effort, strengthening its capacity to resist French dominance. Imagine the industrial might of a unified British North America during World Wars I and II. Instead of acting as an independent, albeit crucial ally, this powerful entity would have been an integral part of the British Empire, contributing its immense resources, manpower, and industrial capacity directly to the Allied cause. The absence of an independent United States fundamentally alters the balance of power, forcing us to consider how Britain, bolstered by its North American dominion, might have weathered these storms, and indeed shaped the very outcomes of these global cataclysms. The world would be a very different place without the independent rise of the United States. The geopolitical chessboard, without the United States, would be almost unrecognizable. The profound absence of the US as a global superpower would create an immense vacuum, the consequences of which would ripple through every major international event. Who would fill this void? Primarily, a British Empire extending well into the 20th century would likely remain the dominant global force. Bolstered by the vast resources and industrial capacity of its North American territories, Britain's imperial reach might never have diminished as it did in our timeline. This extended British hegemony would mean that other European powers, such as Germany, France, or Russia, would likely rise on different trajectories, perhaps finding their expansionist ambitions more directly curtailed by a stronger, more unified British Empire. The Cold War, as we know it, might never have happened, or at least not between the same protagonists. Without American exceptionalism and democratic ideals to counter Soviet communism, the ideological battleground could have shifted dramatically. Perhaps a prolonged global struggle between British imperialism and Soviet communism would have defined the latter half of the 20th century, or perhaps a multipolar world with several competing empires would have emerged. The United Nations, if it even formed, would certainly have a different structure and purpose, lacking the influence and leadership that the US historically provided in its creation and early decades. Technological and scientific advancement would also tread an alternative path. The United States, in our history, has been a crucible for innovation, from the light bulb and the airplane to the internet and space travel. Would these breakthroughs still occur under continued British rule? It's a complex question. While the British Empire certainly fostered scientific inquiry, the decentralized, entrepreneurial spirit of the independent US often drove rapid innovation. Different priorities and funding structures within an imperial framework might have led to different inventions, or perhaps delayed some. The space race, for instance, a defining competition of the 20th century, would have an entirely different narrative. Would Britain, with its extended North American domain, have been the primary challenger to the Soviet Union in the race to the moon? Or would another power have taken the lead, leaving space exploration to a more gradual, less competitive pace? Culturally and philosophically, the world would be fundamentally altered. Imagine a world without American popular culture. No Hollywood film industry as we know it. No jazz music evolving into rock and roll. No iconic American fashion trends. Global culture would have evolved differently, perhaps with a stronger emphasis on European cultural forms, or new, unforeseen cultural fusions emerging from other parts of the world. The philosophical ideals of American exceptionalism, its emphasis on democracy, individual liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These concepts, which profoundly influenced global political thought, would be largely absent. Would other nations have championed these ideals with the same vigor, or would authoritarianism and other forms of governance have found fewer checks and balances in a world without the powerful moral and political example of the United States? The very definition of freedom and self-governance might be understood differently across the globe. In concluding this journey through an unborn future, we are left with a profound reflection on the fragility of history. The what-if scenario of an independent United States never coming to be underscores the butterfly effect of historical decisions. A single divergence point, a different choice made in the crucible of the 18th century, could ripple through centuries, altering the course of entire civilizations. This thought experiment highlights the profound impact of the American experiment, even in its hypothetical absence, on our understanding of freedom, governance, and identity. It encourages us to critically examine the contingent nature of history, to appreciate the pathways chosen, and to ponder those not taken, recognizing that the world we inhabit is but one of countless possibilities. The United States, as it exists in our reality, is not an inevitability, but a testament to a specific set of choices, struggles, and aspirations that forged a nation, and, in doing so, shaped the modern world.